Hi, my name's Hilary, and I was with a band called Search back in the 80s. Um, After I left Search, I did a lot of session work for like 20 years. Then I came back again in Search in 2004. Back in those days, I think I started off with this small little box. You just plug in. That was the main distortion for a few months until everybody was talking like pedals, this and that. So I read a guitar player, which was like my music teacher. That's when I got to know about Van Halen stepping, and then I got to know about Boss. Then I went to Singapore and got myself the DS1, which was my first pedal, and that was the only pedal I used until I heard one of Van Halen's album. It's got this funny notes, even though the Phaser Phase 90 was his main one, but I like that flange sound he was creating. So I bought the Boss flanger. Not this one, but it was called the first one. Yeah, the first one was, in fact, all pedals those days was made in Japan. Then I got a delay because I was trying to replicate what he was using, except that he wasn't using a DS1, but this was the cheapest in the market. I think I bought it for 120 at that time. Everything was Japan. So at that time, then when pedals came about, Japan was like, you have to use US pedal. US is the brand to use, no? So I tried because I was reading about Randy Rhoads. He was using the MXR Distortion Plus. After I bought it, I wasn't quite happy with it. It wasn't give me the drive that I want. So I sold it off and went back to the DS1. And it stayed with me for, I think, about 3 albums until Phenomena, I think. And in fact, after when I was doing session work, this was still my main pedal. Until everybody started talking about ADA, rack mount lah, this like that. I tried, but somehow this would still be there. Even when I was doing chromo, I was going through the Marshall MP1 preamp with a power amp for the rhythm, but somehow the solo I still use the DS1. Yeah. So back then there was no internet, so basically we all put our pedals any way we want it. The delay can be after the distortion, the flanger can be last, whatever, you know, because there was no talk about pedal chain, so everybody put it like how your eyes want to see it. But except for me, I put my distortion right after the guitar, because being a right-handed, so it was easy for me to exercise my leg to switch it on and off. Then many years later, then I got to know that distortion has to come first after the guitar. So that was quite fortunate lah. Yeah. Then I got to know the whatever modulation like flanger, chorus has to be after the drive. Then the delay and the reverb is last. So on those days, my distortion drive was like about 230, just slightly before 3. I felt like it was already a lot of distortion. But nowadays, when I played this one just now, I felt like it wasn't enough drive. I have to put some drive on the amp to get that more higher gain. I remember I did our first gig with Search was in this club called Red Rooster. So after 30 years, they did a reunion. It was I think in 2006 or 2007. So we were requested to play on the last set, being to be the last band. So I brought I think my GT6 there, but somehow it failed. it just didn't have any sound coming out. So I went around asking anyone can lend me a DS1, and what's that guy's name? Zizi, the blues guitar player. So he happened to have one. So I said, can I borrow it just for our set? So looks like DS1 has always been like the lifesaver for me many times. Even I think I did a show, was a KLCC show. My rack suddenly just gave way. It was like having buzzing or something like that. So I went around and asked someone, anyone got any pedal to lend me, So this guy brought his DS1, became a lifesaver again. So it looks like this one will always be the pedal in my life, man. I needed a delay, so the only practical one to get was a Boss, and a friend loaned me his. A friend from KK, he loaned me, and somehow it became permanent for me. It was the DD6, which I normally just use for solos or when I do clean plucking, just to have that continuous sound behind me, even though for clean plucking, almost like what's the American guitarist called, Michael Thompson kind of thing. Even though his was a more faster slapback, but I prefer a longer one, so it's sort of like sustain the clean notes. This setup, distortion, flanger and delay has been with me like many years. Then, like I said just now, everybody was talking about American products, so I tried this brand called DOD. I remember the delay or the distortion was blue color, so I bought 3 exactly the same as what I've been using on the Boss: distortion, flanger and delay. Then I even had someone do me up a box. After I think 2 shows, I actually gave up and went back to this Japanese product, the Boss. Somehow I get more satisfaction playing live than I did with the DOD. So currently I'm now working on with it's like a collaboration with Mankida, and to start off, we're gonna do some old songs when both of us used to be with Search, and as we go on, maybe we'll come up with a couple of brand new singles, and it's gonna, I don't know, it's quite interesting because Mum is into very fast playing, like Malmsteen, this and that, and I'm slowing down. So it'll be an interesting collaboration. The project's already kicked off, and we are going to come up with some old songs first. Then just wait and see. I get a lot of questions. What did I use during my days with Search when we recorded in Lion Studio, Singapore? It's not that I wasn't allowed, but they would prefer me not to record the flanger and the delay. So those delay, reverb and all those modulation, they would prefer to do it during the mix. So my main effects was just the DS1 going through a twin reverb. Just a little drive from the twin reverb and the DS1. Distortion just before 3 o'clock. But at the time I felt was enough for the drive. But nowadays people ask me, is that all you use? Because nowadays everything is high gain from started with Van Halen, going to Randy Rhoads, then to all the modern rock players. So I guess those days, we started off listening to people like Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, where distortion wasn't that much. But even when during our recording with Search, I felt like it was already a lot. Well, time have changed. Times have changed. The famous DS1. This is actually how I set up my DS1 way back then. The drive, the level which is just slightly louder than the amp, and the tone is slightly cut off to get that more mid-range kind of tone, because at the time I kind of like Vivian Campbell's tone, all his Dio albums, so I was projecting more on that mid-range kind of thing. This is the setup. Then for the flanger, it's a lot different from when I used to use. I remember something else was here. I think the frequency. So that was like 9 o'clock. The manual was about 3, and both of this is set at 12. So I only use it when once in a blue moon in a clean plucking, not much in a distortion rhythm, but in the solos I only do it when I do dive bomb on the E string. Only on the E string when I dive bomb. After I switch it off. That's the setting. As for the delay, the level is only about this much, because just to have enough of the to be heard. Then the feedback is only one repeat. The delay time, I like it quite a long, not say long delay, but enough. I don't like those short delays, sort of kacau my head when I solo. So I prefer long, slightly long one.